Right. So I've got this whole prescribed groups thing sussed out now, and the Palestine thing, because I hadn't actually proper taken a look at the law and Defend Our Juries and Extinction Rebellion and all of the other action groups, including Tim Crossland. Crossland doesn't do privileges and doesn't do parliamentary law, so he'll only approach this like through the Human Rights Act side and as a kind of human rights lawyer. So the Met Police have got this completely and utterly completely wrong, and they have been doing illegal arrests, and particularly on old ladies and old people, a lot of them British citizens. Now, there's some important things here, right? And it's not actually that complicated. It's the first 2000 Act, which I think is one of Tony Blair's. It's one of Tony Blair's concoctions, right? So it's obviously going to be sketchy and dodgy. But actually, when you understand it properly, the later acts kind of help to clarify a few things, right? Now, there's the Terrorism Act 2006 and the Anti-Terrorism Act 2008. Those are the later additions and updates, right, from the 2000 Terrorism Act. Now, both the 2006 Terrorism Act and the Anti-Terrorism Act 2008 both have exemptions in them for legally privileged material, right? Legal privilege. Now, that is what we're talking about when we've got parliamentary matters and causes, because parliamentary matters and causes use legal privilege, including in canvassing for them, right? So the Anti-Terrorism Act 2008 and the Terrorism Act 2006 are completely exempt for legally privileged material. Now, so what is the issue with the 2000 Act, which has got these proscribed groups in? Well, these prescribed organisations. Firstly, an organisation is not persons bringing a legal action, a legal proceeding, or engaging in a legal proceeding. You can have like a COP 10 form, which joins parties as a body to bring a legal action, which is the same as when you sign a petition or are representing it, right? They are legal processes, and you're not acting in the private capacity as a citizen anyway, right? You're acting as a legal body, right? Now, there is, it's meant to be the actual group that is prescribed as terrorists who are doing the illegal behaviour, who are the ones who have got these legal constraints around them, right? Now, there's a difference between the actual prescribed group itself and people who are making representations about the prescribed group and who are doing it through a lawful process, like canvassing, using signs and banners. They're not the ones who are breaking the law, right? And they might be helping the group, but that could include, but it's not limited to, a solicitor or a lawyer, right? Or maybe you got a solicitor or a lawyer who's doing like private bill in Parliament, parliamentary agent. Now, if you've got a prescribed group or body and they need to go to court, right? Their court proceedings and actions are not the actions and activities that they're doing, which are prescribed and illegal, right? Then, if they need to go into court, either to defend themselves or to make a claim under the Human Rights Act or something, right? You don't say, they're not allowed to do that. They're not allowed to bring a legal proceeding because they're a prescribed group, right? They can't make representations or they can't give witness appeals out, right? And what about their lawyer? They don't say to the lawyer, you can't make representations on behalf of this group, or you can't represent the group, or they can't have a lawyer, right? I know there are some instances where you can be questioned and you don't have a right to have a lawyer under some of those acts, but when you do go to court and when you do have a lawyer, the lawyer is not, if he you see, the lawyer, when he's representing them, is helping the group. He's assisting them, right? And obviously he's allowed to do that. He's allowed to assist them, right? He's allowed to make representations for them. And it's the same principle as that, but to Parliament, right? So in the same way that some of these prescribed groups might need to get a lawyer and go to court and make a representation, or if they go to the High Court and bring an action themselves and they get a lawyer, he's helping them, right? Well, these Extinction Rebellion people and Just Stop Oil people and Insulate Britain people or Defend Our Juries people or various other people who are wanting to help the Palestinians by getting the government to do a certain thing, that is a legal process. And they are making representations and asking the government to do something in the same way that a lawyer might help those people, those prescribed groups, in court, right? Because you've got messy processes which happen outside of court. Now, they're not banned from having legal representation, right? Now, this is the confusion. Now, it does say that under the meaning and interpretation. Now, this is the confusing part, right? It says that organisation includes any association or a combination of persons, right? It doesn't say what association means. Does that mean like an association or just you associate with them? Now, the lawyer solicits. He solicits for people, right? A lawyer solicits and a barrister represents, right? But he does associate with them, right? So the solicitor needs to associate with or the defendants if they're a prescribed group in order to represent them in court, right? Now, this is why you've got legal professional privilege exemption in the 2006 and 2008 Acts which follow on, right? And that will include petitions to Parliament and causes to Parliament as well, right? As well as going to court. Now, organisation includes any association, but a group of people doing either a petition or parliamentary cause by observation of due process of law are a legal body like under COP 10, right? They're joined as a party, but they're not an association in the sense of like the Automobile Association, right? Because a legal action is, for all purposes, a legal action for that purpose or a petition for that purpose, right? It's a due process of law. Even if you've got multiple people joined together like under a COP 10 or signed to a petition as a community, what it actually is it's a matter of record or writ. Now, a matter of record or writ, either to a court or Parliament, is not an association. It's not defined as an association like the Automobile Association, but you might associate with people. Now, we know that e-petitions to Parliament have been allowed to support Palestine, right? And they're privileged. So that's definitely not being classed as an association because they're letting them do it. But it says or a combination of persons. Now, this is a thing. A combination of persons. Now, this is the reason what I think they were trying to do with this, right? I think they were trying to, they cannot stop you helping them legally either to courts or to Parliament, right? If English people want to get the government to act in a Palestine issue, they're perfectly entitled to make representations about Palestine, right? They are not Palestinians and they are not the prescribed group, right? The prescribed group is the persons who are engaging and acting illegally and unlawfully, right, with the terrorist action, etc., right? Now, when Extinction Rebellion or Just Stop Oil or Defend Our Juries or whomever says, right, we want to help these people by getting the government to act, not supporting them like we're going to help them with their terrorism, we're going to help them like, blow things up or shoot people or, damage infrastructure, all that type of stuff. But we're actually going to help them by getting the government to, either deprescribe them or do something for their country or help, give them aid or something like that. Now, what you'll actually find is that these people who've been getting arrested, like outside the Royal Courts of Justice or knocking around, they're not using illegal terrorist means, like all these bombs and weapons and aggressive stuff. What you'll find is they are merely making representations in public to get the government to act or to get people to support the legal action, right? Not support the prescribed group. They're getting you to support the legal action to get the government to do something about that group either way, right? Now, this is where the police have got a real mind-bender problem, right? A real mental bender because they don't get it and they're thick as mince, right? The people who are holding signs and banners up, that is lawful and it is not any terrorist activity. And it's privileged in the 2006 and 8 Acts, and it is unique. The police, the easiest way to understand it is that those people are acting like if the prescribed groups had lawyers, right? They're their advocates, they're making representations to Parliament and the public to get a action from the government through observation of due process of law, right, and the right to petition. And they don't have to have an e-petition, right? They're not the prescribed group acting in terrorist activities, right? Because canvassing to Parliament is not a terrorist activity, right? And that's clearly what they're doing. Now, the police have really got a very serious IQ problem, right? And it goes with presumption, misinformation, people who just don't really understand it and haven't read the acts properly. And there is a very clear distinction. In fact, the later acts clear up by, confirming that there is privilege. Now, there is something misleading in these acts, right? And that is that there's a part in it which says, if you are acting to get the government to do something, that is if you are acting using means of terrorism to get the government to do something, right? And that's the prescribed group itself, right? Like getting a fucking rocket launcher out or C4 or something stupid, right? Or whatever it is, threatening to, 9/11 or something in a building, right? That's the prescribed group, right? Now, that's not English people or anyone else wanting to get the government to act one way or another about that group and making representations in public through canvassing, which is not a terrorist act, right? And you've got the legal right to do that in the same way that a lawyer has got a legal right to represent that group through legal proceedings, or else they couldn't have an advocate, right? Because the lawyer, solicitor or barrister might need to do a witness appeal. That's canvassing. He wouldn't be able to do a witness appeal if because he was helping a prescribed group, right? Now, that's the same as what these other people are doing, but the police don't like the fact that the public can engage in parliamentary causes and they don't need to be a barrister or a lawyer, right? You can get a parliamentary agent if you want. Now, I know outside the Royal Courts of Justice there were some issues and there's some barristers knocking around, but those barristers are thick as mince as well. They ain't got a clue what they're doing. What they're doing is getting paid, hundreds of thousands of pounds and going to the High Court to try and get an action. They're representing the Palestinians, right? They're trying to get it knocked through the courts to get this prescribed group thing knocked off. Never mind asking Parliament, right? But they're making profit and money out of it. These people are trying to do it to Parliament, and they're actually getting arrested, but they're not making any money out of it, and they're the ones who are getting arrested, right? It's like arresting the barristers. It's like, effectively, all of the people with the signs and notices are the barristers, but going to the public and Parliament, doing a witness appeal and canvassing, right? To get help. Because when you get help from Parliament, you need lots of signatures, right? You don't need lots of pound notes and money to pay a barrister to go into the court to argue it. So they're actually pursuing two resolutions. They're getting high-paid barristers to try and get a resolution through the courts, while at the same time, they themselves are trying to get Parliament to act directly by making representations to the people in public to get signatures or get them to write into the government, right? So you've got two actions, and actually what the police are doing is arresting people who are doing one of the actions, and that's the one that's free. They're not arresting all the barristers for aiding a prescribed group. Why aren't the police arresting all the barristers for helping them? They're associating with them, right? The barristers taking money off them and engaging with them, helping them, right? But notice the Met Police and Mark Rowley is not arresting the barristers when they are combinations of people. The barrister becomes part of the combination of people who's helping the freaking Palestine prescribed group. Why aren't the Met Police arresting the barrister for associating with them, for joining with them, being a representative like under Cop 10? And this is where Mark Rowley hasn't got the IQ, right? Mark Rowley is, he's like Arthur from Peaky Blinders, right? He's a muscle. Well, he likes to think that, well, as much, muscle as he can get out of the police force, right? As much IQ as you can get out of the police force, because no one's stupid enough to do the job, right? He's not intelligent enough, right? Rowley is thick as mince, right? When it comes to law and legislation, and he should know better. He should have better King's Counsel available to the police, but they don't want to do it. They just want to, got to arrest people. Other forces haven't arrested people, right? So this is the problem. They don't actually know the law properly when it comes to this, and there's a lot of stuff in this act that isn't actually relevant to that. Loads of complicated stuff that, just like, it's repeated stuff and things that what is relevant to a parliamentary cause is legal privilege, right? Now, if you take the whole parliamentary cause part out of the equation, right, and you've just got the prescribed groups, these are, persons acting unlawfully in terrorist acts, right? But that's that. And when people want to have a say about it and get something done either way from the government, that's not joining the group and engaging in terrorist action. And that's a big confusion, right? When everyone's going, oh, it's Palestine, when they're holding signs and banners, they're not joining the group and engaging in terrorist activity. They are trying to get the government to do something about the group through representations in public. If they were picking up missile launchers and carrying C4 in their backpacks and helping the group to conduct its terrorist activities, then you could arrest them, right? But this is what the Met Police, that's been a group, right? That's assisting the group, right? And joining it in its illegal activities. And then there's actually some quite serious stuff that needs to be talked about when it comes to fireworks and things like that, which are licensed to be manufactured in England and can be carried around and used. And the early Met Police Acts and what's licensed and lawful and if it's used for advertisements, display and promotion. But then you've got all the stuff when it comes to, right to bear arms for defence. If another authority might be acting unlawfully, this is a thing. So it can get complicated. But again, you've still got legal professional privilege in the later ones. So, but the main distinction is, when you've got these old grannies who are outside the Royal Courts of Justice and they've got banners and signs which are calling the government to act either way, the Met Police are totally wrong. They don't know what they're looking at, and I don't know what they've been told in police college or what the senior officers are telling them, and Parliament definitely are not helping. In fact, Parliament should know this. I think Parliament do know this, right? And they're not actually intervening. And the Attorney General's got an obligation when it comes to parliamentary causes, right? So either the Starmer knows this, and he's kind of like in his head, he knows it and he's smirking, or he actually has... He's just got... His IQ at some point is just gone, and he has lost the mental distinction between the difference between it. Now, I think that he probably likely knows, but I don't think some of the other MPs know. I think that, your average Labour MP doesn't know the distinction between both, because they can't even do their own privileges, right? Patrick Spence, Mike Amesbury, Dan Norris, they aren't actually probably going to know what those acts mean in great I don't think that they actually understand it properly. I think Starmer does, and probably the Attorney General. I don't think that Matt Rowley quite gets it. He's probably picked up the scent from the legal privilege part of it when it comes to. But there's some confusing stuff, like when it says, acting to make the government do something. Yeah, acting through illegal force. Using banners and flyers is not using illegal force, right? So what they're actually doing is the means by which you get the Palestine issue resolved, the parliamentary means, which is free, which everyone's volunteering to do because you don't need to pay barristers to do it. They're getting arrested for it. And then the barristers who are helping Palestine, joining with them, right, are allowed to walk around outside the court. But they're not holding signs and banners, but they're helping them, right? And the police are arresting them. Now, this is what society have come to when it comes to the legal profession. And I actually... The magistrates in the magistrates' courts don't know law. They actually won't have the foggiest, right? They actually haven't got a clue what they're doing, which is quite concerning and dangerous, really. It's probably more dangerous than what the magistrates are doing to people and putting them through in courts after they've been arrested illegally is actually probably as serious, if not more, than what some of these terrorist groups are doing, right? Because it's abuse of the legal process, right? You would have thought some of the other barristers know this, but they don't know the law of Parliament. Now, when it comes to their own professional legal privilege, they're actually using that. That's why they're stopping themselves getting arrested, right? And if a police officer tried to arrest a barrister outside, Royal Courts of Justice, he'd say, I've got legal professional privilege, right? But they're not acknowledging the legal parliamentary privilege for the people who are trying to get this same thing done through the parliamentary process, which is what the signs and banners are. And in fact, the whole ridiculousness of it is that one of the main reasons the barristers are trying to get a resolution in the court is because people are getting arrested illegally as much as they want to help Palestine, right? The Palestinians and the proscribed group itself. So the whole thing's ridiculous. And what is really terrible is that some people are making huge amounts of money out of it, which is kind of like what was happening with the election petitions, all these deposits, and then, the parties claiming money. People making a lot of money out of if you challenge an election when it's going to be a parliamentary committee that investigates it for free, because elections ought to be free. So, if you understand what parliamentary privilege is and that it exists and then you can use it and it's a legal process, and you don't necessarily have to have like a petition like an e-petition, right? It's effectively, it's the same. Why aren't they arresting the barristers who are representing these people? The police, he's just smart and he doesn't have a sign, and but he's talking about, he's helping them. He's helping them. Oh, but that's a legal process. Well, what the fuck do you think is asking Parliament to act, you docile streak of piss? So it's such a dire case with the Met Police in London, watching these people get arrested and these officers with uniforms walking around, and then you get all these people full of misinformation on either side filming it, and they actually really haven't got a fucking clue what they're talking about. And then there's other people going, no, Palestine, it's prison, and they're actually getting people against each other rather than clarifying on the law. So, Starmer's the Prime Minister. He could easily make a press announcement and clarify it for the police or whatever, but he's not. So, he's a despicable man who he doesn't. They're trying to get rid of juries, right? Starmer is not a man of the people. Starmer's not a man of the people. He's a man of Crown prosecutors. He's a man of police officers. He used to be a human rights lawyer, but he went over to the wrong side. And now he's a man of, cabinet functions and, getting his gang into positions of power so he can, dominate and rule the world on what him and a few select people think that the country should be run like, not what on votes and majorities and people think themselves. Because he doesn't think that, Starmer thinks that he's an elitist. He thinks that certain particular people should make decisions about how the country should run and not the people who live in the country, right? Because they're not worthy of it, unfortunately. And he's, he is the Crown Prosecution Service of. It's mainly on these rights issues, and why do people have these, political actions? Because they're not happy with what the government's doing, right? And this is the thing, the people who they vote in aren't telling the truth. Look at all these committee reports where they're even the MPs are even deceiving each other. The MPs are even tricking other MPs, like misleading them, like in these committee reports. And tricking MPs into their out of their rights. Look at Andrew Bridge. Look how Andrew Bridgen got treated. So they're even deceiving each other. These MPs while they're in Parliament, which is even more scandalous than them. Deceiving the people, the voters. So it's a real problem.